like our catastrophic parametric risk insurance, or whether it's not using a big word like operationalize the loss and damage fund, but actually put the money in the fund and make it available for those of us who suffer the loss and damage. It's a partnership for mutual benefit. Because the lessons we learn in small island developing states of resilience, of adaptability, of sustainability is a lesson that we can share with the world. And that's all we're asking for, partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Mian Mohammed Shehbaz Sharif, Prime Minister of Pakistan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida yuslih lakum a'malakum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum wa man yuti' Allah wa rasulahu faqad faza fawzan azima. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate my very dear brother, President Ilham Aliyev, for organizing a wonderful event to understand the calamities which unfortunately some of the countries have already faced, and some will if we do not act to counter those measures which are so important at this point in time to have conducive environment so that a country like Pakistan, which faced one of the most devastating floods out of climate change back in 2022, which left millions of people homeless. They were spending days and nights under open skies. Millions of acres of land in Pakistan submerged, and standing crops were completely destroyed. Millions of houses were absolutely submerged, and almost 1,700 people died. And of course, the loss to our economy was about $30 million. That was the cruel intensity of those floods. And this must be kept in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that Pakistan is one of those countries which hardly contribute 0.5% of emissions, global emissions. And yet we are vulnerable and in the list of those 10 countries which can, God forbid, face this kind of devastation again. My memories are still fresh. I was meeting people in Balochistan who were affected by these floods. A boy by the name of Ikramullah had lost everything. His entire village was erased from the face of the earth. His home was completely demolished, and his school was also submerged. And we had arranged his education to another part of Pakistan, and this boy is becoming a very productive hand of Pakistan, but not for all those who had suffered this calamity in Pakistan and other parts of the world. So, ladies and gentlemen, here is this opportunity that Cop29 should understand make this understanding loud and clear that we will have to fulfill those financial pledges committed in COP27, COP28, and yet I think those huge financial commitments have to be materialized. Ladies and gentlemen, we would also like to raise this point that 10 years ago in Paris, we had failed to stop the rise in emissions and catastrophic global warming. And those pledges in Paris 10 years ago, which were made, have yet to see the light of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, as the -1 emitters, we should not brave the impact of emissions realized by others without even the tools to finance resilience. Without climate justice, there can be no real resilience, and I wouldn't want other countries to face the plight Pakistan faced back in 2022. Ladies and gentlemen, Pakistan is a resilient, hard-working and responsible nation, and we are fully committed to being part of the global climate solutions. My government has taken concrete actions to deliver on its commitment of producing 60% of all energy from clean sources and shifting 30% of our vehicles to EVs by the end of this decade. At the same time, Pakistan is going to go through a renewable energy revolution. Last year, Pakistan presented a comprehensive national adaptation plan. And this year, we have developed our national carbon market framework. But we cannot do it alone. Pakistan needs international support to deliver on its climate ambitions. Ladies and gentlemen, the hammer is on. I'd not like to take more time. But let me say, developing countries will need an estimated $6.8 trillion by 2030 to implement less than half their current NDCs. The same goes for adaptation and loss and damage. And in COP27, Pakistan led this phenomenon by our very able team, led by Madam Shari Rahman. We believe that under Azerbaijan's able leadership, COP29 can transform into a finance COP by restoring confidence in the pledging process and scaling up climate finance. I strongly feel that climate finance must be grant-based and not add to the debt burden of vulnerable developing countries. Finally, Excellencies, 2 years ago, I warned at the top of my voice that the future would never forgive our inaction. Today, I echo the same warning with greater urgency and fullest energy at my command. Ladies and gentlemen, we know the causes, we know the solutions. Now, we must find the courage to act and act swiftly. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Daniel Nicholas Risch, Prime Minister of Liechtenstein. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, dear leaders, let me start by thanking the Republic of Azerbaijan for its effort in the run-up to this Leaders' Summit and for hosting COP29 here in Baku. The presence of so many states from around the world is a powerful sign that the fight against climate change is a key challenge of our time. Also, it underscores that only together we can find solutions. And noticing the slight critics on Europe and at least some European states in the introductory remarks of President Aliyev, I'd like to point to the fact that all European countries sent high-level delegations to Baku, and that I myself and a large group of prime ministers and presidents from Europe are here in Baku to show full support of Cop29. Because one thing is clear: multilateralism must be our answer to the global threats arising from climate change. Our annual gathering is also a sign of enduring courage. Our world is experiencing a multitude of security, economic, political and social challenges. The number of conflicts and therefore also the number of displaced persons and humanitarian needs is steadily increasing. Climate change in particular has the potential to further aggravate global security risks. It is therefore crucial that we come together again to keep the targets of the Paris Agreement within reach. One thing is clear to me: it will be us who have to explain our children and grandchildren why we have not tried harder. With a quarter of this century almost over, we all feel the increasingly negative consequences of human-made global warming. The time is now for bold steps to keep these negative effects at bay. It is the challenge of our generation to shape the current political and economical system for a more sustainable future for all. Last year, we came together in Dubai and agreed on the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel era, a crucial step to realize the steep and fast reductions in carbon emissions necessary. Liechtenstein has strongly supported this bold decision and encouraged all states to strive for the most ambitious carbon reduction targets possible. Cop28 also marked the conclusion of the first global stocktake. The GST and the scientific evidence provided by the IPCC have laid bare the gaps with regard to climate action. These gaps need to be addressed at this COP and in the next round of nationally determined contributions due next year. Liechtenstein fully supports the outcomes of this first GST and intends to submit its updated NDC in early 2025, well ahead of next COP in Brazil. Let me be clear at this point: producing ambition NDCs on paper is important, but in the end the actual delivery and implementation of these targets will be what counts. It is not about leading by promise, but about leading by example. In this spirit, Liechtenstein has always taken its commitment serious. Despite being one of the most industrialized countries in the world, our carbon emissions have declined by 30% compared to 1990, while GDP is 5 times higher than back then. This was only possible due to strong commitments from our private sector to actively reduce their emissions and the adoption of ambitious policies. Mr. President, I hope that this year's COP will also mark a step change in the way we provide financial means for developing countries in need of support. As we have learned from the current climate financial goals, a quantitative target can lead to frustrations both with developing and developed countries. To counter this, we strongly advocate for a stronger focus on qualitative elements, adding flexibility and the foundation to the further scale-up climate finance. Liechtenstein is already and will continue to provide voluntary climate finance, currently amounting to around $70 per capita. And we encourage all countries in a position to do so to also start providing voluntary climate finance. Looking ahead, our delegation is ready to engage in the upcoming negotiations and will support the Presidency in its effort to achieve meaningful and robust decisions. We all may face challenges currently, but we are obliged to do our best to keep the goals of the Paris Agreement within reach, for us and for the generations to come. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Aziz Akanouch, Prime Minister of Morocco. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, heads of state and government, ladies and gentlemen, we thank and congratulate Azerbaijan on organizing Cop29 and for its unstinting commitment in preparing this momentous event. Under the enlightened leadership of His Majesty King Mohammed VI, may God help him, Morocco has for many years played a major role in the energy transition at the international, national, and continental levels. And here, the Initiative for the Adaptation of African Agriculture, known as AAA, was launched under the auspices of His Majesty at COP22 in Marrakesh with a bold vision: transform African agriculture and protect the environment to tackle climate change. In close collaboration with the African Adaptation Initiative, the AAA initiative continued its action on three main tracks: improving soil management, increased access to water for irrigation, and the integration of resilient agricultural technologies. Ladies and gentlemen, in keeping with the enlightened vision of His Majesty the King, renewable energies in Morocco today account for approximately 40% of electric production capacity, a figure which will rise to 52% by 2030. Morocco has also begun updating its nationally determined contribution, NDC, and will be raising its decarbonization ambitions, and by integrating new structuring projects, namely desalination plants using renewable energy and repurposing biomass, as well as green hydrogen, with some of the most competitive solar and wind resources, as well as a proven track record in attracting investors. Morocco intends to play a key role in responding to the major challenges of carbon neutrality. Ladies and gentlemen, Morocco takes full ownership of its responsibilities. However, these challenges concern each and every nation of this planet, especially the most industrialized countries. Natural disasters due to global warming, which are increasingly frequent and intense, are causing considerable economic and human loss and is affecting food security, health care facilities, and access to safe water. The world is awaiting concrete commitments coming out of this COP29 to accelerate ecological transition and to provide, in a spirit of solidarity, the necessary resources for implementing them. And here I would highlight sustainable financing solutions for adaptation funds and climate insurance mechanisms to enable the most vulnerable countries, often the least historically responsible for emissions, to strengthen their resilience. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Russell Miso Dlamini, Prime Minister of Eswatini. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellency President Ilham Aliyev, President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Your Excellencies, Mukhtar Babayev, President of the 29th Conference of State Parties to the UNFCCC. I am honored to deliver this statement on behalf of His Majesty King Mswati III, head of state of the Kingdom of Eswatini. A year ago in Dubai, multiple leaders stood on this platform, urging immediate action to tackle climate change. Since then, our countries, Eswatini included, have endured severe climate-induced events. In our case, these ranged from destructive hailstorms to droughts that have upended livelihoods, especially in agriculture, a key sector for the people of Eswatini. Excellencies, it is abundantly clear that we are at a critical juncture. The World Meteorological Organization warns of an 80% chance that global temperatures will exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial levels within the next 5 years. A catastrophic milestone. Meanwhile, the UNEP Adaptation Gap Report highlights an adaptation cost gap projected to reach up to $340 billion by 2030. After 30 years, the stark question is, are we failing? We must seize what may be our last opportunity. As Alexander the Great said, upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all. We must strengthen both our commitments and our collaborative efforts to tackle this global crisis. The recent UN Summit of the Future called for unity to safeguard our planet. Cooperation must genuinely address mitigation without placing undue burden on poorer nations or sacrificing nature. Equitable solutions for all people, profits, and our planet are imperative. Meaningful action also demands that no country be left behind. In this regard, we urge the inclusion of the Republic of China and Taiwan in our collective climate response to leverage their contributions. Effective climate finance remains essential, yet accessing these funds is overly complex for developing nations like Eswatini. We face frequent climate-induced disasters, compounded by financial barriers that reverse development gains. Disaster relief and climate finance must be simplified, streamlined, and expanded with a focus on adaptation, mitigation, and just transitions. As we finalize our NDCs, let us not lose sight of the ultimate goal. Together, we must commit to a world where future generations will look back on this moment as the turning point toward a resilient and sustainable climate. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Mark Stephen Brown, Prime Minister of Cook Island. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
To the Honourable President of the Conference, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Kia ora. I come from the Pacific, a part of the world that contributes 0.03% of carbon emissions to the world. The Paris Agreement goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius remains within our reach, but only if you act decisively. And when I say you, I'm talking to the G20 countries who contribute 80% of global carbon emissions. How many countries in the Pacific are doing our part in mitigation with ambitious projects for 100% renewable energy? The science is clear. The world is warming, and the transition away from fossil fuels is non-negotiable. As underscored by last year's global stocktake outcome, this challenge goes beyond economics. It is about safeguarding our communities' resilience, even in the remotest corners. Climate change is not a distant threat. It is a present reality that we face every day in the Pacific. And now we see its impact in the developed countries, with Spain being the latest victim just a couple of weeks ago. We don't need to be enemies to each other. Climate change is and will continue to be the greatest enemy to all of us. We need to work together. Let me talk about climate finance. Climate finance is not just the catalyst for climate action. It is the essential ingredient. Developing countries need sufficient and reliable support to implement the Paris Agreement effectively. For small island developing states, specific finance provisions within the Paris Agreement recognize our unique vulnerabilities. A successful new collective quantified goal must reflect this. We call for minimum allocation floors on the new collective qualified goals for SIDS, directly linked with the provision goal. This floor should be no less than $40 billion in grant equivalent terms per year, a conservative estimate based on our pressing needs. To achieve meaningful progress, SIDS must have access to high levels of concessional finance. This means grant funding for adaptation efforts, not loans. It means grant-based finance for loss and damage response. Do the right thing by our countries. Don't make us jump hoops and then wait. Accelerating the financial support will bring us closer to the scaled-up finance and improved access envisioned by the Paris Agreement. While the Pacific faces the brunt of climate change through sea level rise, the erosion of small islands, flooding, droughts and extreme weather, inaction will lead to consequences felt globally, growing more severe with time. So let us ask ourselves, what if this was my home, my family? This shared sense of humanity should inspire us to work towards tangible, transformative outcomes over the coming days, ensuring that Cop29 concludes with meaningful progress. These appeals have been voiced countless times, including by myself at previous COPs. Yet, here we are again, frustrated by inaction, unheard, and facing resistance to the necessary scale-up of climate finance. For the sake of those most vulnerable, we must set a path forward that aligns with the urgent realities we face. My country is ready, again, to play its part. The question remains, are we ready to act decisively and collaboratively for future generations? I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Musalia Mudavadi, Prime Cabinet Secretary and Cabinet Secretary for Foreign and Diaspora Affairs of Kenya. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Your Excellencies, distinguished heads of government and heads of state, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I bring salutations from President William Ruto of Kenya, and I make this statement on his behalf. I congratulate you, Mr. President, on your election as the President of Cop29 and commend the people and government of Azerbaijan for hosting this historic meeting. Similarly, I congratulate the leadership of the United Arab Emirates for the historic milestones and achievements made at COP28. The COP presidency has called on us to act in solidarity for a green world and to drive actions on finance, energy, agriculture, cities, and human development, climate peace nexus. I believe these bold areas hold a great promise in consolidating the gains already made as we escalate the fight against climate change, whose impacts are widespread. In Kenya, the impacts of climate change are an everyday reality. Currently, we are experiencing unusually warmer days, yet only 5 months ago, we experienced horrible floods that led to the deaths of 267
and displaced 281,000 people. The floods also destroyed critical infrastructure, including 1,967 schools, 62 health facilities. Besides, the droughts of last year destroyed livelihoods and killed over 2.4 million livestock. This troubling climate story is not confined to Kenya. Africa as a whole is already grappling with the climate-induced annual losses and damages on infrastructure, agriculture, water, tourism, and other climate-sensitive sectors, ranging from 9 to 12% of the continent's GDP. Consequently, this meeting is a demonstration of solidarity and intention to act together to change the tide and rewrite the climate story. I believe a green and resilient world is still within our reach during our lifetime. This finance COP can make it happen by agreeing to scale up the climate finance based on a new collective quantified goal, quantum for not less than $1.3 trillion annually from 2025. This is key to meet the adaptation and loss damage needs of developing countries. The COP should also agree on quantum of not less than $5.8 trillion for the implementation of NDCs by 2030. Further, we must agree to deliver this vital financing both in quality and urgency, as well as with transparency and ease of access. This is crucial in accelerating implementation of the national adaptation plans. We equally need to agree on a global goal on adaptation as we significantly increase ambition for the NDCs to limit a global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. The COP should agree on the investment measures to triple installed renewable energy capacity by 2030. Enhanced cooperation on carbon markets under Article 6 of the Paris Agreement has a huge untapped potential to unlock the much-needed public and private capital. I am aware the current carbon markets are facing price volatility and misallocation of credits, lack of uniform standards, and climate justice. The COP must therefore address these issues and others in a conclusive manner and operationalize Article 6 through renewable bilateral agreements and centralized multilateral marketplace. The loss and damage facility has progressed commendably from Sharm el-Sheikh 2 years ago to Dubai last year. While I acknowledge the milestones so far realized, I urge this gathering to operationalize the loss and damage fund, as well as to fast-track establishment of a mechanism to handle unique needs of vulnerable developing countries. The response measures are critical in mitigating climate change. However, some measures have negative cross-border impacts on trade, food security, livelihoods, competitiveness, and development. Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, global transformation to a low-carbon economy requires an investment of at least $4 to $6 trillion per year to support climate action. However, most developing countries cannot raise this capital due to high interest rates on loans, escalating costs of climate shocks and transition, and depressed fiscal space. We must reform the multilateral development banks to unlock financing at scale and to create incentives such as debt restructuring and sustainability, including the high cost of capital, borrowing, as well as scale and agility of climate finance. Technology and innovation are key to providing appropriate practical solutions and to enhancing efforts by developing countries to eradicate poverty. We must therefore break the hold-ups to technology and innovations to enable the developing world to leapfrog sustainable growth models. Similarly, we must enhance research and early warning systems to bolster predictive capabilities and avert calamities, as well as transform agricultural and food systems to cut emissions, develop resilience, and create job opportunities, especially for women and youth. Mr. President, to conclude, we need to confront the weak political will and the unsustainable economic interests that put profits over people and the planet, standing on the transition to a global low-carbon economy to achieve a green world. We need credible commitments and robust international cooperation for transformation, to transform the climate crisis into opportunities. We can do it, and we should do it. I thank you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Judith Siminwa Tuluka, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President of the Republic of Azerbaijan, Heads of State and Government, Mr. Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, President of Cop29. Ladies and gentlemen, we are gathered here today in Baku at Cop29 at a time when our planet is dealing with an unprecedented climate emergency. We can all observe that climate change is accelerating, challenging our projections and our adaptation capacity. The key lies in collective action, which must be bold and underpinned by the principles of justice, equity, and solidarity. My country, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the world's largest lung, is known as a solution country with its vast expanses of forests which regulate global climate, its rich biodiversity, its freshwater reserves, its immense wetlands and vast tracts of arable lands, as well as its many critically essential metals for cutting-edge technologies in this area of energy transition. The DRC is at the heart of climate challenges. However, we are extremely vulnerable to the effects of climate change and global warming. We must stand with our other partners to achieve our shared commitment, because these are serious times. Each country must play its part. Furthermore, we must be transparent and act in good faith to address the issue of climate financing, which must respond effectively to needs with more ambition, more commitment, but also, and more importantly, more equity. In response to the climate crisis, our government has prepared a national adaptation plan, which needs to benefit from significant financing to respond to our shared objectives. There is an urgent need to ease the requirements for access and to accelerate the operationalization of the funds earmarked for L&D. I believe it is sufficiently clear that the biodiversity in the east of the DRC is in danger, and yet we are forced to divert a part of our budget to deal with this barbaric war instead of investing in climate resilience. Therefore, I call for a collective awareness of this tragic and unique situation. The Democratic Republic of the Congo is committed, along with the rest of the international community, to identifying together strategic projects to be implemented in a lasting win-win partnership that will benefit our local and global communities. As such, the DRC has set up a carbon market regulating authority, and we intend to use this, implement Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. It would be remiss of me if I didn't express my heartfelt thanks to the Republic of Azerbaijan and its president for the very warm hospitality extended to us. I also wish to reiterate my call for all stakeholders to mobilize around the commitments that we have undertaken, that we undertook at the Paris conference in 2015. As such, I would join other African group countries to call for the NCQG, the new collective quantified goal, to be established at to be set at $1.3 trillion by 2030, based on concrete results and specific needs of developing countries. I am deeply convinced when we all mobilize and are driven by a shared commitment to preserve our planet, this conference can achieve its objectives. Next year in Belém, we must ensure we can announce encouraging progress and make concrete achievements as part of our environmental commitments. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We will now suspend the statements for 15 minutes. Kindly keep your seats. We will resume shortly. Thank you. Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, we will now hear the special messages. And it is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Cho Hong Sik, Special Envoy of His Excellency Mr. Yoon Suk Yeol, President of the Republic of Korea. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
President of Cop29, esteemed leaders and distinguished representatives, good afternoon. I'm honored to join Cop29 as the special envoy of President Yoon Suk Yeol of the Republic of Korea. At last year's Cop28 in Dubai, we reaffirmed our commitment to achieving carbon neutrality by 2050, aiming to meet the 1.5 degrees Celsius target. We took crucial steps with the UAE consensus, pledging to triple renewable energy capacity and accelerate low-carbon technologies like nuclear power and hydrogen. These are foundational steps toward the world we envision. Here at Cop29, we must now establish the mechanisms to translate these commitments into action. A new climate finance goal is essential to reach the 1.5 degree target, and I hope COP29 will adopt a framework that is both ambitious and achievable. Setting strong emission reduction target is also vital as the impacts of climate change are becoming severe globally. This year alone, Korea experienced an exceptionally long and hot summer, reminding us that the time to act is now. With our vision as a global pivotal state, Korea is dedicated to supporting climate resilience in the global south. Our official development assistance increased by 30% this year, with a particular focus on green ODA for countries most vulnerable to climate change. Additionally, Korea recently pledged an extra $300 million to the Green Climate Fund and $7 million to the Loss and Damage Fund, underscoring our commitment to shared solutions. Domestically, we are also advancing a green transition, targeting a 40% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. This is ambitious for an energy-intensive, manufacturing-based economy, but we are fully committed to meeting this challenge. As part of our strategy, we are preparing our 2035 nationally determined contributions in alignment with the 1.5 degree Celsius goal and the 2050 neutrality target. Our carbon-free energy initiative, developed in partnership with Japan, the Czech Republic, and UAE, and the IEA supports a diverse mix of carbon-free energy sources, establishing standards for global implementation. Climate change is a shared and urgent challenge. We are already seeing the cost of delayed action. If we fail to act decisively now, the climate may reach irreversible tipping point. I hope Cop29 will give us inspiration to take bold steps toward achieving the 1.5 degrees Celsius target for the benefit of present and future generations. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Mr. John Podesta, Senior Advisor to the President of International Climate Policy, speaking on behalf of the President of the United States of America. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. Colleagues, on behalf of President Biden, the United States is here at Cop29 to help produce successful outcomes that keep 1.5 degrees C alive. We face an urgent question. Do we secure sustainable prosperity for our countries, or do we condemn our most vulnerable to unimaginable climate disasters? 2024 will be the hottest year on record. The consequences of a rapidly warming planet are all around us. From the hundreds of people killed by Hurricanes Helene and Milton in the United States, to the millions of children at risk of starvation in southern Africa from the worst drought in decades, to the torrential rain that stranded students in schools and displaced nearly 100,000 people in Colombia. Vulnerable communities do not just need ambition, they need action. That's why President Biden and Vice President Harris have marshaled unprecedented climate resources over the past 4 years. Because of historic private sector investments made possible by the Inflation Reduction Act, the United States economy will continue down the path of decarbonization, reducing emissions for years to come. And we are on track to meet President Biden's ambitious international public finance commitment of $11 billion per year by the end of 2024. To accelerate our progress here at COP29, we need to first conclude key negotiated outcomes. This includes building on last year's global stocktake concluding work on Article 6, and adopting a robust NCQG that addresses climate insecurity while building strong, sustainable economies. It should be multi-layered with an ambitious, realistically achievable support layer involving new contributors, underpinned by a set of qualitative elements that evolve the international financial architecture, enhance access to finance for developing countries, and improve debt sustainability. Second, countries, particularly major economies, need to keep their Dubai commitment and submit 2035 NDCs that are economy-wide, 1.5 aligned, and include all greenhouse gases. Third, we encourage countries to submit their first biennial transparency reports by December 31st. The United States will meet that commitment. And fourth, promote the action agenda in key initiatives outside the Paris Agreement. Colleagues, we have a clear choice between a safer, cleaner, fairer future and a dirtier, more dangerous, and more expensive one. We know what to do. Let's get to work. Let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. As I've indicated, we will shortly resume the first part of the high-level segment for statements. Please remain in your seats. Dear distinguished delegates, let us now resume the first part of the high-level segment. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mikhail Mushtin, Prime Minister of the Russian Federation. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguished Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I greet all the participants in the conference. Under the leadership of President Putin, Russia is taking active part in measures taken by the international community to combat global climate change in order to guarantee the well-being of future generations. We've managed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions virtually twofold compared to 1990. By 2050, we're planning to achieve carbon neutrality. We are placing emphasis on enhancing energy efficiency, developing electric transport, and introducing modern solutions in agriculture and forestry. In Russia, 85% of the energy balance is already accounted for by clean, low-emission generation, first and foremost gas, nuclear power, and renewable sources. We are enhancing our own technologies and productive capacity to decarbonize various sectors. And of course, we use our natural resources. Our country possesses a fifth of global forestry resources, and the volume of absorption of carbon dioxide exceeds the equivalent of 1 billion tons. And President Putin has stressed that Russia is calling for the pooling of efforts to combat climate change. And here I'd like to highlight 4 priorities. Firstly, agreeing on a new collective goal for climate financing in the interests of developing states. We need to make support for them real and tailored to the conditions in which they find themselves. Moreover, the resources should be directed towards decarbonization of high-emission sectors as well. Secondly, it's important for the transition to low-emission energy to proceed without it being to the detriment of the development of low-income countries. It's not possible to use the problem of global warming as a pretext for discrimination, unfair competition, and artificial restrictions. There's also a need to introduce practical mechanisms for implementing international agreements. There's a need for a single system for assessing the quality of climate projects. And of course, we need to establish cooperation amongst the scientific communities. National research can replenish and clarify data on climate change on a global scale in order to ensure effective decisions for decarbonization and adaptation. Distinguished colleagues, Russia remains committed to low-carbon development. We are improving our legislation. We are extending voluntary assistance to vulnerable countries in the area of climate, and we are ready to continue such work in close dialogue with all interested states. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. This brings us to the end of our national statements for today. Distinguished heads of states and government, delegates, honored guests, the opening of the second part of the high-level segment will be held on Tuesday, 19 November, in this plenary at 10 o'clock in the morning. With this, I declare this joint meeting of the COP, CMP, and the CME adjourned.
yesterday I met him. I went for the city's event of Ikle in the pavilion, but his term is ending. Oh, yeah.